Beep, 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 beep. Hey, Ben Hauck back again. This is my book, Long Form Improv. We are doing a video series right now. I'm doing a video series with you called Reading Long Form Improv. And it's all about the different chapters in the book, help flesh them out for you as you read along. This video is chapter 2, and it is titled, let me just find it for you, Rules versus Principles. Now, why are we doing a whole chapter? Why is chapter 2 of this book called Rules versus Principles? Because I find it's a very important thing to deal with. In teaching students. When people come to improv classes, they want to know the rules of improv, and they've heard different things here and there, and they think they always apply, but they're confused when they don't apply, or when someone breaks the rules, why it works. It makes students neurotic, so it's really just a matter of kind of defining what those terms are. That's why I did it in the book. And this is what they mean to me, and I think it makes a lot of sense. When we're talking about rules, what we're really talking about is instructions. Fundamentally, we're talking about a rule is a kind of instruction. Now, what's the function of instruction? Well, the function of instruction is to get a person out of conflict, at least in general. You're given instructions so that you're not in a conflict, so you can get out of that conflict. Let's say, let's say, back in Star Wars day, you fall into the trash compactor. I'm just riffing right now. You fall into the trash compactor. You're struggling to figure out how to get out of the trash compactor. If you're just given instructions, you would be able to get out of how to get out of the trash compactor. You get out of the trash compactor. But because you don't have instructions, you're in a lot of conflict. So an instruction helps people get out of conflict. And so an instruction essentially constitutes a lesson learned from past experience to make the present experience less wrought with conflict. Hope that makes sense? Should. Just think about it a little bit. Rewind if you need to. So what's a rule? A rule is an instruction that always applies. There's never an exception to a rule. A rule is, this is what you do every time you're in the situation. So if you're in that trash compactor and the walls are closing in, then if you're given an instruction like push the red button, then that's what you do every time you're in that kind of conflict. And that's what constitutes a rule. Now, if there's an exception to the rule, it's not a rule. I don't call it a rule. Instead, it's a principle. It's what we call a principle. A principle is something that applies in general, but does not necessarily always apply. So if, for example, you're in the trash compactor and the electricity goes out and the red button doesn't work anymore, pushing the red button was not actually a rule. It was a principle. You should push the red button presuming that there's power. So pushing the red button is a principle, meaning in general you want to push the red button, but not all the time is that going to work. Sometimes you're going to have to do something else, like maybe put a bar in between the compacting doors and then hold them open. So there you go. Rule is something that always applies. Principle is something that applies in general, but not always. Wonderful. So what are you hearing most of the time when you go into a long-form improv class? You're mostly hearing principles, not rules. Let me explain. So, for example, let's say you go into an improv class, or maybe you've just heard before that, when you go into an improv class, or when you go into an improvised scene, always say yes to everything. Sounds good enough, right? Say yes to everything. Right. Well, what if someone puts you in a compromising position that you do not feel comfortable performing in an improvised scene? I would say that you're allowed to get out of that scene. I would say that you don't necessarily say yes to those things that put you in an uncomfortable situation, a highly uncomfortable situation. Let's say maybe some illegal activity or something controversial or polemic happens in the improvised scene. You don't have to say yes to that. So that would mean that always saying yes in an improvised scene is not truly a rule. It's actually a principle. In general, saying yes, in general you want to, quote unquote, always say yes, but not in actuality. You're going to do it most of the time. So what does that mean? What does it mean a principle versus a rule is? A principle is a lot more flexible, and it's a lot more conditional than a rule. In a rule, you always do it, no matter what the conditions. When you have a principle, you do it, you weigh the conditions. You want to follow it on the whole, though. It would not be an instruction you get if you don't follow it in general. If you follow it rarely, it's probably not even a principle. I wouldn't even call it that. I don't know what I would call that. I don't think about that. But when you're in improv class, you are learning instructions, and these instructions are not really rules. They're more like principles. Now, I'm going to make a point about this. Now, in your original improv classes, in your first improv classes, in your first long-form improv classes, I would actually encourage you to, in general, follow them as rules. So, to the best possible degree, follow them as if they always apply. And I would say, you know what, let the teacher protect you if there's any kind of, if you find yourself in a difficult situation. Let the teacher say, you know what, stop the scene. I don't want to see this pursuing. You guys don't know each other, and it's not cool that you're pursuing this. But just see how far you can go and always applying. So always saying yes in a scene, for example, with that one instruction. Always do it. Always say yes no matter what the situation. I would say in your classes do that. And this is why I'd say, when you have a collection of instructions, or more specifically, when you have a collection of when you have collection instructions, that constitutes a form, the form of long form improvisation. That's its form. That's its structure. That's what makes it. When you change the rules, when you change the instructions, you change the form a little bit. Now, when you have a form, or let's say the form is rules, and when you follow those rules strictly, you are executing proper form. I like to make a comparison. Let's say you're taking Pilates class and you're in a C-sit or something like that. Your core is crunched, and maybe there's a little alignment issue. Your teacher will come and adjust you to put you into proper form. Now, if your teacher didn't do that, you might have developed your abs. They might be pretty strong. But when your teacher adjusts you, presumably you get even more strength in your abs and your core. So executing proper form has more benefit, a deeper benefit, a greater benefit. Now, it's great that your abs are real strong from executing improper form, but even better when you execute proper form. Same kind of applies, at least when I teach long form improvisation. It's great to try to follow these as best you can, the instructions you're getting, as rules. Truthfully, these instructions are principles, but follow them as best you can as rules, and then as you get better at them, find the exceptions. Allow yourself to take exception to some of them to play. What happens when you do that? Well, when you move away from just following instructions to electing to make exceptions here and there, you become a bit more of an artist. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Yet, I'm training you in certain something. I don't want you to automatically come into class and say, I'm an artist, and then you don't follow anything. As a teacher, I want you to follow my instructions. Please, follow the instructions. I don't need to plead with you. I know you will. Follow the instructions. Follow them as best you can as rules. And then every once in a while, take them as principles, and that's fantastic. As a teacher, I might say, you know what? I didn't like when you did that. Or I won't say that necessarily, but it's like, I'd rather you do this kind of choice as that choice. There you go. There you have it. That's chapter 2. Rules versus Principles in my book, Long Form Improv, which is available on Kindle and Nook and at Amazon and Barnes & Noble in stores. And maybe there'll be an audiobook soon. I hope you'll read it. I hope you'll buy it. Check it out in the library. I'm Ben Hauck. Thanks for watching Chapter 2, and Vista La Hasta.